Hello, my name's Sam and welcome to this video on lesson planning, preparing for micro-teach. So this is primarily aimed for people doing train the trainer, but it's quite useful if you're doing some of the basic lesson planning for session planning for community education or workplace training, whatever, or even if you're AAT. So what we're just going to do is we're just going to look at putting the lesson plan together ready for micro-teach. So here we go. So I've got a training plan, a type of training plan here that we tend to use, or that I tend to use for train the trainer and sometimes for AAT. There are different types that it's up to you what you're going to use. But the key elements will be here. So first thing is I'm just going to put a general heading here, and I'm just going to have home electrical maintenance, and my aim or aims, but I'm just going to have one because it's very limited when you've only got half an hour. I'm going to do simple general maintenance for domestic electrical appliances, checking a plug, and I'm just going to put the date that the session will take place. So in this case it was going to be the 12th of Never. Needed to be bold. Okay, so then what I need to do is I need to come up with my learning objectives. So aims and objectives are similar. People get stuck on them all the time. Ideally they should all be measurable, but the key part is the learning objectives are what your learners and you are going to do in that session, and if you achieve those objectives then you reach the aim. So the aim is basically broken down into these objectives. So I've chosen two that I think should work, and hopefully they will. So I'll just cut and paste them over here rather than type them in Scratch. Okay, so I've got two, and I'm just going to highlight these two words at the front because they're really simple, important words. So learning objectives: 1. List the steps of general safety maintenance. 2. Perform general maintenance of an electrical item or on an electrical item. And now I could make these a little bit more situated, more contextualized by saying, you know, by checking the plug. The important thing is that if people can list the general safety maintenance steps, and if they can perform general maintenance using those steps, then that lesson aim is achieved. So that would mean that these align to achieve that. So if you want the theory for that, it's constructive alignment. In fact, the important thing is to make them measurable, make these learning outcomes clear and measurable, so that it's clear that the learners can understand what they've done. So what you should be able to do is make it, if you ask that question at the end, if it's a yes or no answer, then the chances are it's a good learning outcome. So if I said, did we understand the steps of general safety maintenance? People might say yes or no, but then you have to say, well, how did you understand that? Understand, you can't really measure it. But if I said, did you list the steps of general safety maintenance? Well, either you did list them or you didn't list them. So therefore, list is a good measurable verb. Then I could say perform. Did we perform general maintenance on an electrical item? Or yes or no. So those two are good. So you're looking at actionable verbs is what we call those. But you'll get advice from your tutors on that. So then we come into this. So those are the two learning out objectives or outcomes or objects I'm going to do to achieve my aim. The hardest part of your plan. Done. So now, how do I do it? Everything is driven by these learning outcomes. So first section tends to be quite a interesting one. So what's happening here is time is telling you how much time you need to apply to that section. Activities and methods, what are you going to do? Resources that you'll need, what are the learners going to do in this column, and assessment evidence in that column. So what assessment evidence are we capturing? So here we go, let's start doing the plan. So introduction, always a good idea to have an introduction element. I tend to just leave the word introduction so that whenever I use a session plan, I know that I've got an introduction included. And in the introduction, you introduce yourself, you introduce the session, the aims, and most importantly, these learning outcomes. It's quite important to share your learning intentions so that the learners know what they're doing. It's very hard for people to know what they've achieved if they didn't know what they were trying to achieve in the first place. One of the most important steps ever. Okay. So, what resources will I need for that? Well, I've got a PowerPoint already prepared. So I've got this PowerPoint, that's what I would have to use. What are the learners doing this? Well, because this is all me talking, telling them stuff, the learners are actually passive at the moment. And what they can do, though, is they can listen and ask questions. Assessment and evidence, really important. Every single step of your session should link to an assessment method, but otherwise you can't really go on. So it's this constant checking, formative assessment. So how would I assess this? Well, I will assess this using questioning. So I will question at the end of this to make sure that these learning objectives are understood. So I might say, did you understand those learning objectives? Well, everyone's going to say yes. And say, well, what are we going to do? How would we do that? To try to make sure that I understand. Don't just use, a basic question when you need to check that the people really understand. Okay, and how long is that going to take me? Well, I've had a quick go of practicing this, and I'm fairly sure I can do that in 4 minutes. I could probably do it in less. Whoops. Okay, but we'll come back to that and revisit them, because if your timings aren't going to work, then you're going to have some problems. Okay, and that's where you sort of have to practice them. The longer you've been delivering, the easier that this will become. So then, what we're going to do is, I'm going to fill in the next. Well, okay, so in a Blue Peter style, I've already got one ready prepared. Okay, so, and this is going to take, I think it's going to take 6 minutes. I'll think about it in a minute. Probably only going to take 5. Okay, so tutor-led PowerPoint presentation. So this is what we would call lecture or chalk and talk. General maintenance of electrical items in the home. Health and safety for working with electrical items and the equipment needed. Okay. Okay, so I got my PowerPoint on that, and my PowerPoint will have some slides such as health and safety. So it'll be unplug, switch off, unplug, check the cable, etc., etc. It'll have all of those steps, and it'll all go through them. But I might even put a background of why it's a good idea. So then, because I'm teaching and talking, I'm delivering, my learners are actually quite passive. So all they can do really at this point is listen and ask questions. So that's what they're doing. And I'm going to use questioning. Now I might use questioning throughout. Might use, and these are going to be for formative assessment. Make sure that everything that I'm doing is understood. So I use questioning. I could use a different method. We could break out and have a discussion. Then I could use discussion. The 3 that you're most likely to see being used in a regular session for formative and for the tutor and even for the participants will be questioning, observation and discussion. You will get others, but those will be the 3 most commonly used ones. Okay, so I've done that. So I've given them information, but that doesn't mean that it's made any real sense. It hasn't been put into any context. So I've got a bit of an activity here. So I'll just drop this row in. So in this row, what I've got is I've got a nice little 5-minute sequencing activity. So I'm going to facilitate the matching activity, which will be a sequence of steps of general safety maintenance. And in this, we'll be matching a number to a step. Okay, so I've got a matching activity, which is my resource. And in this, the learners are active. They're matching the activity. They're placing the correct activity to its order number. So I've got like numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Number 1, turn the switch off or up the main, etc. Number 2, take the plug out. Number 3, check the cable, etc., etc. So they're just putting them physically into those. And that's quite clear. Now, obviously, whilst they're doing that, how would I assess that? Well, I would use observation, so I can see as they're doing how they're doing on their worksheets. But I've got worksheets, stroke, activity sheet. Also, we got evidence of that by the completed activity. So if they're in the correct number sequence, it's done properly. And we might use peers to assess that. We might, do a swapping, have people got it right, whatever. So there we go, 5 minutes. Right, so that was objective 1. This is not objective 1. I'm going to move on to objective 2. That is still working on objective 1. Oops, I really must learn how to type one day. Should have done a micro teach on how to type. Right, okay, now activity 2. It's a little bit fun, I think, but then I don't, I live in a different world to everybody else. And what I'm just going to do is copy and paste this over. I think we'll look at 6 minutes at the moment, but we'll check this in just a minute. Okay, so my objective 2. So this time I'm going to facilitate an activity. I'm going to using the sequence guide from above. So in here, they create a sequence guide. That's the order, the matching number order. Using that sequence guide, perform general maintenance on an electrical item. So I come over here. They're going to use the sequence guide to perform maintenance on an electrical item. They're going to check the cable, open the plug, check the wiring, and identify the fuse, which is about all I can fit into a micro teach. We may, if I had more time, then there would be more steps. It might be take the fuse out, replace the fuse, make sure the fuse is the right fuse, etc., etc., etc. Okay, now to do this, I've got some electrical items, some lamps, so that they can do this. I've also got screwdrivers ready to be used, and the sequence guide that they've created above. So they've got this template that they're using to follow, and that will help them. And you sit there and go, I wonder what that is. It might be a scaffolded resource. There you go. Okay. Observation. Whilst they're doing it, I will observe to see that that's working. Now then, because I got a group, I'm going to observe participants to assess, so I may need learners to stop at certain points so I can just check that each of those points is done. Okay, and I'm going to give myself 6 minutes, so we got 10, 16, 20. Ooh, we've got 20 minutes. We can, because that would be better, 22. 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, do something like that. I now got more time, so what I can do here, because I got a bit more time, I can do what I call APL. Assess prior learning. Does anybody know this? What do they know? And if I've got somebody who's more knowledgeable than the others, I have a more knowledgeable other, and they might be able to help or support, and it's those different levels that we get. I'd think about that, but we'll sit elsewhere. So 7, 7, 20, 28. I've got 2 minutes to wrap up the session. So in the end, it is nice and simple. Oops, I just made a bit of a mistake on the other one I'm copying and pasting from. Here we go. Control C, Control V, shortcuts for cut and paste. So I'm just going to go back and pop that. No, I can have that at 8. I'll have that at 7. This is 6. This is 5. I'm fairly sure they will work 11, 18, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. I've got a 1 minute safety margin. So it's always worth counting up, do a bit of numeracy. Oh, embedded numeracy, there we go. So, and in this one, we're going to recap the session. So what was the session about? What did we do? Aim, revisit the aim and the outcomes, check for those outcomes. And on this particular case, my assessment method will be questioning. It could be, we would have a discussion at the end. It depends. If you're going to have a discussion, then the assessment method would be discussion. So I'm going to put my learners into passive again, which I don't like doing. And I'm going to do a, they will listen and ask questions. Yeah, and I might even ask for questions, what did you think? How did that go? Whatever, time permitting. Okay, so that is the session plan. Now, what you're looking at on a lesson plan is enough content that another tutor in the same area as you, with the same sort of department or whatever, could deliver the session with just the lesson plan and the rationales. That's the data, the information that you're looking for. You don't need to make it too complex. Okay, now extension activity is useful. If you underrun, then you've got something else that you can do. Also, you could have an extension activity that somebody could go away and do some learning in their own time afterwards. It adds that value to it. So with this, I've got, we could have some other items that they might do some maintenance on in case somebody's more able and therefore they can go on to the next level. You might even do something where you do some other items with bits missing or the wrong fuse in, etc. So they've got stuff like that. Now, it will depend upon your setting, your organisation, but it's a really useful idea to get your lesson plans in for micro teachers to your tutors beforehand so that they can have a look at it. It will depend upon your tutors and what they say where you're studying. And it's worth popping your name on the bottom. Okay, so that is lesson planning for a micro teach. If there are any questions, drop them into the comments. Thank you.